Alright, well, thanks to a bunch of cheap automation stuff off Amazon, I'm going to see what I can come up with here. Got a paracord, a 120 to 24 volt 5 amp power supply. That's way more power supply than I need for a couple little contactors and relays and whatnot, but they're all about the same price, so why not? This guy is a little timer, programmable timer, has an internal battery to keep the clock set, it looks like. This guy is a multifunction relay that can do a bunch of stuff. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to use that. I might need more of these. We'll find out. Just depends on how hard my brain is going to work tonight. And this is a relay that can be controlled off one or more little liquid level sensors. And for that, I've got this little float switch that can apparently be normally open or normally closed by just flipping this over. So no clue if that will work with this, but we're going to try it out and see. So before I plug this in here, let's at least make sure this Chinese electronics here are grounded. Let's see, where's the other end here? There it is. We'll just go off the body of it. Okay, that's a good sign. And nothing grounding out to the neutral or hot, so that's good. Let me hook up, I think it's got two outputs here. I don't really know why I would need two, because anyway, I'm just going to hook it straight up to here and then hook the sensor up as well and see if we can hear a relay or something in there clicking. Alright, so Kiki, stop. The supervisor's here trying to chew on wires. We're still learning not to do that. So check this out. So right now, when this comes up, you can hear the relay clicking in there. So what I want this to do is once a day, which is the idea with the timer, I want it to turn this contactor on, which will turn the well pump on and start filling up the tank. And when the tank gets to the top, I want it to stop, turn the contactor off. I don't want it to do anything else once it's full. I don't like if somebody uses a little water and this drops down, I don't want anything to turn back on again until the next day. So that's going to be the interesting thing, is basically having it function during basically the time period that's allowed. Like I think I'll set it to, I don't know, maybe work during the day or something where everybody's gone. So say from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It can work on filling up the tank as long as this little sensor here is down. And like I said, when it gets to the top, I want it to turn the whole thing off, or at least turn the contactor off, and stay that way. So this won't try to pump at all anymore that day. It's just going to fill the tank up once and then stop. So that's hopefully where this multifunction deal will come in. We'll see what all it can do. What I'm kind of thinking is I don't believe there's a way to make this just do a pulse, which sucks because this has a latching relay function that if this timer can do a pulse, which I don't think it can, unfortunately, I could have it when the timer comes on, it pulses once, which is going to send power to the contactor, and then when either the timer runs out or the water level comes up, it also pulses and turns the latching relay off. Or, turns the latching relay the other direction. So this has all these different modes that it can do. I think I'm going to need more of these guys. But I need to experiment with all the different modes it has and what it can handle. So let me read the directions a little more and we'll see what we can come up with. Well, I finally got the kind of testing of all the automation stuff done here, and it seems to be working as intended. So the next step will be putting everything in an enclosure and setting up the automation for this pump to turn it off if the water level drops too low. But I need to get some more stuff for that. So this setup right now is just for filling up the tank. So power supply, programmable timer, the multifunction relay, and the liquid level relay. And then I did have to get a different contactor. The one I bought I thought was DC, but turns out it was an AC contactor, and it very quickly burned up the coil on 24 volts DC. So I bought this one, which is really big and way more contactor than I need, but it should definitely never have any trouble with the well pump. It's 24 volts DC on the coil, and it'll handle up to 80 amps AC. The most that well pump is going to draw is maybe a hair over 5 amps. So here's what's going on. The programmable timer is the only thing constantly receiving power from the power supply, which I am going to get a smaller power supply, by the way. I have no problems with it. It's just way bigger than I need, because even when that contactor's on, and if I add another contactor for this pump, still only drawing maybe like 2-3 tenths of an amp or something. So I'll get one that's hopefully maybe the size of that. That'll allow me to put everything in a smaller enclosure. Anyway, so the programmable timer is set to turn its relay on from, I think, 5 p.m. to midnight. And it's the only thing constantly receiving power from here. So when this timer turns on, what it's doing is sending power to both of these relays, as well as to the input pin on this device's relay. So I guess I'm calling these relays, but for the sake of this, I'll just call these controllers, and they both have a relay built into them. So when this timer is on, it's sending power to the input relay, or the input on the relay in this controller. And if the liquid level sensor is down, this one will energize its relay, and it's going to send power to 2 locations. The first is going to be this little jumper that runs over to the input of the relay on the multifunction device here. And that one in its normal state passes power from 15 to 16, and that's just coming down here to the contactor. Now, the other thing it's doing is sending power up to the switch port on this guy. And what that is doing, it's set on the G mode, which is like a time off delay. So what it does is it looks for kind of like a switch press where power is applied and then released. And then as soon as it's released, it's going to start its countdown timer. I have it set on 10 days. It really doesn't matter what it's set to as long as that timer outlasts the time period that this relay is energized. So what will happen, when this timer turns on, if the water level is below here, it will turn the contactor on. Well pump turns on and fills up the tank until this sensor is open again. When it's open, this relay is going to turn off, and it will see the loss of power to the switch port on here, and this one will begin its countdown. And when it begins its countdown, the relay inside here is energized and starts passing power from 15 to 18 instead of 15 to 16. And so when it's doing that, it's breaking the power to the contactor. And the idea behind that is it keeps the well pump from restarting more than once a day, which is what I wanted, because the issue would be if, let's say, this thing were to fill up with water and then really you don't use much water. Let's say you go flush a toilet and I don't know, turn a sink on for a minute, use a few gallons of water. What'll happen is that level will drop down. This sensor here will see that it's dropped, and then it would immediately turn the well pump back on. So it's basically letting this tank fill up to the top once a day, and then once it does that, it's not going to fill up the tank again until this timer runs out of its time period, cuts the power to both of these relays, and the biggest thing it's doing then is this one resets back to its default state, regardless of if it was in its countdown or not. It resets when it loses power. So what I'll actually do, this is set to off right now. I've got that plugged in. I'll go ahead and, actually, you know what? Let me go use a little bit of water. Alright, so hopefully I've used enough water to trip the little sensor there. So I'm actually going to put this on auto because we're still within the time period, and what you should see happen is it will You'll see the relay energized, that red light will turn on when the relay is energized, and you'll hear the contactor click, and it should start filling the tank if the sensor is below the water, so it should be. Yep, there it goes. So the well pump's going to come on and start filling this tank. Now, I guess I can sit here and record this and then speed it up. What you'll see next is the pump filling the tank all the way up, and you'll see the controller on the left, its relay turn off, and the one on the right will turn on its relay and it will start blinking. And as long as that's blinking, it means it's in its time delay. So the pump can't restart even if you were to go use water. And so there it goes. It filled up the tank, and now this one's blinking. And so now, rather than reaching my hand in my clean water there, I'm just going to jump the terminals from the C up to max there. And you'll see that even if this were to try to come back on to fill the tank up, it won't be able to, because the power to this contactor is now being cut because this relay is energized. Let me make a little jumper here. Never mind, I don't need a jumper. I've got the sensor set up in a different way. So instead, pretend that that is the sensor changing its fluid levels and trying to restart the pump, but it can't because this guy here is in its timeout. So let me hook that back up, and then I'll show you one more thing. All right, one thing I wanted to add to this. I said I was using the off delay, which I'm not. I'm actually using the single shot trailing edge deal, which you can see you have the power. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually turn this off to simulate its time period being up, say it's midnight. And what you'll see is that when this one loses power, it resets to its neutral state. And then I'll power it back on. And now this one would normally turn on if there was any water lost out of the tank, but of course in a couple minutes the pump hadn't come on. So that all seems to be working really well. I'm pretty happy with it, and assuming that I can find the stuff to do what I want with this pump, I will get that set up as well. I looked at the same company that makes these here does make some I guess it's like some kind of a inductive current clamp type device that can measure current. I was originally planning on using that for looking for low current from this pump, basically what would be happening if it ran out of water and had no load on it. However, finding those seems pretty difficult, so I think what I'm going to do is just set up another setup like this with a float switch much lower on the tank, maybe have it cut off when it gets down to 100 gallons or so. They have a more basic version of this that I will use for that. And honestly, I probably could have got that same one for this. I didn't really need the dual function one, but it just was just what I got. So it seems to work fine. So when I get the simpler version of that, this was the GRL802. We'll get the GRL801 and see how that works. I looked at the directions for it. It says that one only works in a 2 float switch mode, whereas this one here, the O2, can work with 1 float switch. I don't see that being any problem to set up for what I need this to do, because it's not like it's pumping and filling up the tank or anything. It's simply just cutting current off when the float switch is at a certain level in the tank, or cutting current to the pump. So I'll need one of these, and I will probably just get another smaller version of a contactor like that, and probably just wire it up to a 120 volt outlet. And that way that the pump can just, whatever pump I have, whether it's this one or I get another one, it will have its own special outlet that will be controlled off of the float switch in the tank. So I'll try to put the stuff I used in the description here on the video if you're wondering what any of these are. But like, I got everything off Amazon. There's the power supply, there's the model for the timer, and these two, and the contactor right there. The float switch I can't remember, so I'll put a link to that. But it's just a, I think you saw it earlier in the video. It's like $12. But one thing, this isn't really threaded in there. I mean, it is threaded in there, but not like it should be. I've heard that it uses a 1-inch, or that it's threaded for a 1/8 NPT. So I will get a tap and run it through there eventually, or at least for this other sensor, so that it's kind of threaded into the tank, and then I'll just silicone around them to seal them totally up. But I don't see this going anywhere. It's in there pretty tight, but just to prevent anything like that from coming loose, I should thread it in there. So the next video, I guess, will be, I'll probably have a box for this, and I'll also get the components for controlling the pump here, and we'll get it all tidied up. Thanks for watching.